Coming up on Global Business, factory expansion. China's industrial production landscape continues to expand, with profits of major firms rising nearly 19% year on year during the first 5 months of this year. Cool boost as severe heat waves continue to simmer over Europe. Chinese-made air conditioners are flying off the shelves, with China's AC exports to the EU hitting a record high, up more than 43% this year. And cautious recovery. The Strait of Hormuz reopens under ceasefire, but shipping activities remain below pre-conflict levels as Iranian and Omani diplomats meet to negotiate whether a toll will be enforced. Welcome to CGTN's Global Business. I'm Lincoln Humphreys. China's industrial production landscape continues to expand. According to official data, profits from the country's major industrial firms surged nearly 19% year on year during the first 5 months of the year, accelerating by 0.6 percentage points compared with the January to April periods. The equipment manufacturing sector sustained double-digit profit growth, with the electronics industry, boosted by rising demand, posting a more than doubled profit increase and serving as a key engine of overall industrial earnings. Meanwhile, high-tech manufacturing maintained rapid momentum, with profits rising roughly 45% from a year earlier. Our reporter Xing Ruinan visits Liaoning Huanghai Laboratory, where advanced 3D printing is boosting China's high-end manufacturing with smarter, more efficient and more precise production.
At Liaoning Huanghai Laboratory, cutting-edge 3D printing technology is upgrading China's high-end manufacturing industry.
These industrial 3D printers are building lightweight components layer by layer. We're not talking about simple parts. We're talking about complex components for aerospace and ships.
Every parameter is precisely calibrated, with finished parts strictly measured and optimized to meet industrial-grade standards.
3D 打印呢，是目前新质生产力的典型代表。
3D printing, prime example of new quality productive forces right now. It opens up a whole new pathway for high-end equipment manufacturing, both domestically and internationally. Large format 3D printing, in particular, is in high demand across sectors like aerospace, rail transit, and marine engineering. We're committed to providing full-stack solutions, from materials and equipment to processes. Our work has already been recognized by clients both in China and abroad, and we've successfully achieved industrial-scale production.
Such technological breakthroughs are bringing revolutionary changes to traditional industrial production.
What used to take weeks to manufacture with traditional methods can now be done in days. This is exactly the kind of advanced manufacturing innovation that's redefining what made in China means.
China's push to embed green developments into its infrastructure is driving manufacturers to confront their own carbon footprints. Our reporter Zhang Shushuan visits a wind turbine tower maker and finds out how it's cutting emissions per unit of revenue, achieving more with less.
This is an industry where products weigh hundreds of tons and sell for millions of yuan.
This tower is for a large wind turbine. The large wind turbines that sit atop towers like this are often lauded as one of the best ways to generate green energy. But many ask the question, what is the cost of manufacturing these things in terms of carbon emissions?
In 2024, our group's total electricity consumption for the year was nearly 50,000 megawatt hours, of which 94% came from traditional thermal power and only 6% from green electricity, indicating a heavy reliance on fossil fuels. That year, the combined carbon emissions from direct combustion and purchased electricity reached 43,800 tons, with carbon emissions per 10,000 yuan of revenue accounting for 0.09 tons.
Last year alone, the wind turbine tower manufacturing giant produced 713,000 tons of towers with its more than 10 factories across China.
Manufacturing these towers using traditional technologies usually demands a lot of energy and also represents a large carbon footprint.
Recent years, foreign clients, especially those from the EU, have raised new requirements regarding ESG, carbon footprint, and carbon emissions. In 2026, they will also impose mandatory carbon tariffs under the CBAM. Against this backdrop, our company has been actively pursuing a green energy transition. Some clients even require that we use 100% green electricity in the manufacturing of their products.
The day I visited one of the firm's factories in Yangzhou, Jiangsu, it was working at almost full capacity to ensure a July delivery for 2 overseas projects, one in Australia, the other Serbia.
So, the big-name manufacturers were among the first to recognize the issue. And so things have changed.
The group started its green transition 3 years ago, having released its first ESG report back in 2023. Last year, it joined the United Nations Global Compact.
Part of the response is right here, an entire rooftop covered in solar panels.
Last year, the factory in the Jiangsu city of Yangzhou had 30% of the electricity it used generated by those solar panels. But for a wind turbine supplier, the obvious question is, why not use wind power?
As for building a wind farm, it requires a site with good wind resources and also occupies a large land area. Given our factory's actual conditions, we do not have much spare land, but we do have ample rooftop space. We chose the green electricity solution that is more suitable for a manufacturing plant like ours.
And of course, adding solar power is far from enough. It's always important to continue finding even more efficient technologies to lower that carbon footprint.
In terms of groove processing and grinding, we introduced mechanized equipment, which improved overall efficiency by 35%. In welding, we upgraded the weld groove design from a V-shape to a U-shape, increasing welding deposition efficiency by 40%. Additionally, we adopted more advanced regenerative thermal oxidizer equipment for environmental protection, further enhancing energy utilization efficiency.
After this series of upgrades, the group has lowered energy and material consumption by around 5%. R&D-driven carbon efficiency is expected to improve by around 8% year-on-year. Zhang Shishen, SMG International for CGTN Shanghai.
Now to China's cultural industry revenue. It hit a record high in 2025, rising nearly 9% year-on-year to 20.8 trillion yuan, or $3 trillion. A report from the National Bureau of Statistics showed the industry's annual profits reached nearly 2 trillion yuan, up 7% from the previous year. Services-related sectors contributed more to the total cultural industry growth, indicating a structural improvement. New business models experienced a 15% revenue increase, outpacing traditional sectors, with online advertising, online gaming and digital publishing emerging as key growth drivers. China's summer box office has got off to a robust start, with movie theatres nationwide raking in nearly 1.6 billion yuan, or around $235 million since June 1st. Nearly 80 movies are expected to screen from this month to August. A diverse range of films, from comedies to Chinese culture, are among the new releases. The highest grossing films so far this summer are China's low-budget drama Dear You, that features generations-long correspondence between overseas Chinese labourers and their families at home, and the 5th instalment of Toy Story. Time to check some other business headlines in China for you now. Trade between the Hong Kong Special Administrative Region and the Chinese mainland grew at an average annual rate of 6.7% over the past 29 years to reach 2.6 trillion yuan in 2025. In the first 5 months of this year alone, it surged at 48.6% year-on-year to 1.4 trillion yuan, driven by faster customs clearance and deeper Greater Bay Area integration. In May, national electricity market transactions rose 23.6% year-on-year to more than 626 billion kilowatt hours, while the January to May total climbed 24.8% to 3.06 trillion kilowatt hours. Both intra-provincial and cross-regional trade posted solid growth, reflecting stronger inter-regional power coordination across the country. And China has placed 20 Japanese entities on its export control list for dual-use items, requiring domestic firms to obtain government approval before any sales. China says the measure targets only a small number of entities and is aimed at deterring Japan's remilitarisation and nuclear ambitions. You're watching Global Business. Up next. As severe heat waves continue to simmer over Europe, Chinese-made air conditioners are flying off the shelves, with China's AC exports to the EU hitting a record high, up more than 43% this year.
The world economy as we know it is about to change. Global business reports highlight emerging markets, developing countries, and dynamic sectors worldwide. We feature top analysts and newsmakers to provide perspectives on every facet of business. From an on-the-ground perspective, we provide you with balanced and objective assessments. Fast, sharp, and insightful. Global Business. Only on CGTN.
That heatwave continues to scorch Europe, with Poland, the Czech Republic and Germany reporting their highest temperatures on record. In Poland, firefighters and police have been placed on heightened alert over increased wildfire risks and water-related accidents. The Health Ministry is stepping up monitoring of heat stroke and dehydration cases. The Czech Republic also recorded its hottest day on Sunday, reaching 41.1 degrees in the northern town of Doksany. Germany registered a new all-time high temperature for the third consecutive day, reaching 41.7 degrees on Sunday. Peter Oliver reports from the German town of Templin.
Well, what a day to own an ice cream van or any shop that would sell cool drinks or anything that can cool people off, because it has been another exceptionally hot day in Berlin and here just in the outskirts around the German capital. Those red weather warnings here in Germany have been in place for a few days now, with the advice being to stay out of the sun where possible, to make sure that you stay in shade where you can, wear a hat, that you take on lots of water and you avoid strenuous activities. You might be able to see there's not all that many people splashing around behind me on the beautiful lake here in Templin. A lot of people remaining somewhat indoors, if you can put it that way, or at least under some form of shade. Not a lot of people out and about, as those like myself who've fled the city of Berlin to get away from the searing heat there have come out to the lakes and the forests around the German capital in order to get some sort of respite. But it has caused huge problems, the soaring temperatures here. In fact, we've had a provisional record temperature recorded ever in Germany. It's really caused a lot of problems, particularly with transportation. Highways are jammed as trains haven't been running. Also, power supplies have been disrupted. Public services in general bear a thought for those trying to repair Germany's creaking infrastructure at the moment, as highway crews up and down the Autobahn supposed to be working in these temperatures, many of them having to be pulled off the job. Well, there is reports that another warm weather front is moving in as well, and that could be the next phase for Europe as this first heat wave, or first major heat wave of the year, starts to make its way eastwards into that eastern part of Europe. It isn't going away. It's just going to move those new record-breaking temperatures perhaps a bit further along the continent of Europe.
The European Commission's headquarters in Brussels have shut down the air conditioning on its lower floors as extreme heat swept across Belgium. However, the offices of most high-level commissioners remained unaffected. Staff at the Commission's Berlaymont headquarters were informed on Friday that the air conditioning on floors 1 through 7 would be shut down for the rest of the day due to the extreme weather. The partial shutdown prompted criticism from staff working on the lower floors. One Commission official described it as feudalism, while another called the situation a disgrace. The heatwave has reignited debates over the limited availability of air conditioning across Europe. Air conditioners made in China are flying off the shelves as Europe swelters through record-breaking heatwaves. Portable split ACs from China's Midea and other Asian manufacturers have become a top pick among European consumers. With new models sold out across multiple retail channels, second-hand units are now going for nearly twice their original prices. For the first 5 months of this year, China's AC exports to the European Union reached a record high of $3.8 billion, up more than 43%. Sales to key markets, including France and the Netherlands and Belgium, have more than doubled compared with the same period last year. Industry experts say demand is expected to stay strong throughout the summer. For some added insight, let's bring in Chu Chang. He's a fellow of the Belt and Road Research Centre at Minzu University of China. I hope you're keeping your cool. Europe is experiencing extreme heats on a scale its infrastructure was never really designed for. Homes, schools, hospitals lacking cooling now. The European Commission, as we heard, on the lower levels at least, while power grids are also under extreme strain. To what extent is this a failure of long-term climate planning versus structural limits in Europe's energy and building systems?
Well, again, I'm feeling truly sorry about Europe because my friends in Europe are telling me the scorching heat are actually literally killing people. Well, I think there's several reasons behind that. I think number one is about the planning. Well, I think the Europe actually, very long-term insist on this emission, reduction policy. I think it's perfectly correct, but it is pushing forward so fast, and we need to slow down a little bit to adapt to the change we're facing right now, because the climate changing is outpacing what we're having right now. So sometimes we need to slow down a little bit to adapt to this fast changing of the scorching heat coming from the climate change. And also, when we're talking about this, actually, we'll have to talk about the infrastructures, buildings, and the air conditionings, as well as for the healthcare in Europe, because it takes a very long time to renovate the whole infrastructures. But now the scorching heat wave is coming really fast. So we really need to look into that and slow down a little bit about current policies. For example, if we take a look at the building codes in Europe, actually, most of the buildings are built in the green code, but in coldness rather than to let the heat out. And also, there's a lot of historic buildings which need to be protected by law. So the renovation to a large scale actually had to be stopped. And also, we know that we have the Ukraine crisis, the energy structure change in Europe happening right now. But in this moment, if you're pushing forward the green energy, revolution, yes, it's good, but you still need to slow down a little bit to adapt to the pace, because we have the energy crisis happening at the doorstep. And also, we're talking about the infrastructures like the grid, the power grid, and also the power transmission. And all that actually need a large-scale investment. And also, we have so much of the policy debate happening in many countries in Europe. But what's the consequences? If you take a look at that, you will find out most of the consequences have been suffered by the vulnerable groups, like low-income people, like the senior citizens. And this is not just the first time. If it's the first time, we can understand, but ever since 2022, the last time the heat wave actually caused more than 60,000 deaths in Europe. So we already have these examples previously. So I think this is the true moment that we need to look inside this kind of the real challenge and put aside all of our differences and solve the problem starting from right now.
Speaking of those differences, it is such an extreme human toll that it's taking, and demand for cooling systems is surging across Europe. Chinese manufacturers are stepping in to fill quite a bit of that gap. But with rising EU trade barriers, you talk about the differences, protectionist policies are now constraining supply at a critical moment. Are they potentially driving up costs for consumers?
Oh, yes. I think currently China is one of the major countries, the manufacturing of the cooling systems. And we really want to help with Europe because we seriously understand what's going on. It's kind of extreme weather, event. Because China used to, experience the kind of the things before. In 2024, we also experienced a blackout and extreme, heat wave in the Sichuan provinces and the Guizhou provinces. So that we understand. But currently, there's some politicians in Europe. They see that all this kind of the differences is much higher than the cooling, than the health of the senior citizens in Europe, than the vulnerable peoples in Europe. But in our eyes, we think the real human rights is let the people just survive. Let the people can actually have these cooling conditions. So let's put aside all this kind of the sanctions and also the anti-dumping policies or the de-risking. This is the moment we really need to cooperate with each other because climate change is a real challenge facing all human communities. Human community with a shared future is our common goal. So let's just face it and work together. And China, I think we're really arranging all kinds of the shipment waiting in China, just waiting for your agreement on that. And China can help, and China really want to help.
Air conditioning does offer some immediate relief, but it also increases energy demand and emissions. So looking ahead, what would meaningful international cooperation and collaboration on green energy and climate-resilient urban design actually look like, and who needs to lead that push?
Well, I think both of us actually will need to form the consensus. Both China and Europe need to lead this green revolution together, but also adapt to the changes, because China and Europe are probably two of the most steady, supporter of the climate change is responding. Well, Europe need a green revolution. We know that you need green development, and trying to have the capacity. We can work together, and we fully understand with each other in this front. So the supply chain we can build together is the key. And secondly, we can actually have lots of experience and best practices we can learn from each other. Europe has very good practices in the green building, and China actually have all this kind of capacity in infrastructure buildings, especially in this very acute change, in this very serious heat wave hit here. We need to respond very swiftly. That is the reason why China and Europe more than ever should work with each other. And thirdly, this is a global challenge we're talking about. This is the time we put aside all these differences and make sure that we can build a platform to talk to each other, because this cooling actually can be, very similar to what we can work together on, clean water, basic health care, and all that. We have successful examples to work with each other together. So now let's work with each other to face all these vulnerable peoples, low-income people, senior citizens, and physically challenged peoples. And if we still wait and hold grudges against each other, I think time will not wait for us.
Thank you very much for your insight. Really appreciate the expertise as always. Professor Chu Chung, our thoughts are with our friends there in Europe. He's a fellow of the Belt and Road Research Centre at Minsk University of China. Now to Greece, on Santorini, climate change is rewriting the economics of wine, with desalination plants running at full capacity and tourism competing for every drop of water. Production costs are spiralling. But a group of vintners is fighting back, exploring treated wastewater irrigation, solar-powered atmospheric water capture and row planting techniques to cut costs and secure supply. The stakes, a $250 million or €250 million wine industry, and the future of Greek viticulture.
The vineyard on the Greek island of Santorini, winemaker Yannis Boutari gestures to a dried-up Kouloura vine, which endured for 90 years, but was finally killed by heat and drought. The plant's fate highlights a growing problem on Santorini, where low rainfall and searing temperatures from 2023 to 2025 have increased the price of grapes, slashed wine production, and intensified concerns over water supply.
There's a lot of talk around what should be done in Santorini. The main thing for our winery is that we're not abandoning tradition. We are adapting to the changes, we're learning from the tradition, and we're adapting the vineyard to the new circumstances.
Boutaris runs the Domaine Sigalas winery, now part of the Kiryani family of wineries, is testing a pilot project with local authorities and scientists to take wastewater from homes and hotels to irrigate the vines.
The reputation and quality of Santorini wines has risen in the last 20 years. But because it is only the last 20 years, the price of the final product of Santorini cannot rise to such high levels. If we had the reputation that French wines have acquired in more than 150 years, we could justify the price for Santorini to be bigger. We recognize that this water is used in other regions, and it is very good for cultivating vineyards. Nevertheless, we have to try it on Santorini also.
Winemaker Yannis Papakonomou is also planning to tap into the wastewater project for his 6-year-old vines. 11-year-old Vesoltis vineyards relied on buying grapes, but unusual heat and a lack of water and farmers over the years reduced grape supply.
The lack of winter, the lack of water, the lack of farmers, and in the end we had all that climate change that came to give the final hit, I think. So we must adapt and proceed in new way of thinking and find a way out.
Winemakers in Greece are all waiting to see the results of the wastewater pilot project, which is being set up, and local authorities are waiting for state funding.
Now we're on to some other business headlines we're tracking for you this hour around the globe. The Republic of Korea will invest nearly $1.2 trillion in a new chip-building hub and AI data centre over several years, with Samsung and SK Hynix committing a record $520 billion to a new semiconductor cluster. The government will also invest around $650 billion in AI data centres over the next decades. The Bank of America says Micron's strong results reinforce expectations of a super cycle in global memory chips, with supply tightness and product upgrades extending the boom through to at least 2027. The bank expects DRAM sales to surge 316% and NAND 295% this year. And Google has started restricting Meta's access to its Gemini AI model as the Facebook parent company's computing power demand exceeded Google's capacity. The Financial Times reported the supply constraint has disrupted several AI projects at Meta, which has also asked employees to cut token usage. Now to Iran's Deputy Foreign Minister is disputing US reports, saying talks would occur in Doha on Tuesday. US sources had previously told Axios that both countries were standing down after strikes over the weekend. Meanwhile, President Masoud Pezeshkian told Iranian state media that the US lifting certain sanctions would see $6 billion of assets frozen in Qatar returned to Iran. This comes as Iranian and Omani diplomats meet in Muscat to negotiate control of the Strait of Hormuz and whether a toll will be enforced. Only 124 vessels have passed through the strait since Thursday, a fraction of pre-war levels.
After the Islamabad Memorandum of Understanding signed between Iran and the United States, the U.S. eased sanctions to authorize Iranian oil sales for 60 days while peace talks continue. That initially raised hopes that the Strait of Hormuz would move from crisis back to commerce. The MOU also gave regional Arab countries and the global energy sector new hope that trade would be normalized to avoid prolonged disruption in the world's most critical oil checkpoint.
During the first days after the waiver was issued, Iran could export its reserves on the water as well as its deposited crude. Around 40 million barrels of Iran's oil passed the strait within a few days.
That rapid oil movement fueled broader expectations across Iran's trade sector. Exporters and importers hoped the reopening would revive more than just energy shipments.
Since a few months back, when we have had this war in place, the Strait of Hormuz has been blocked, and then reopening of that would definitely give us a very good avenue to move, more freely in order for us to be able to send our products from the main port of Iran, which is Bandar Abbas.
But on the ground, the logistics for that revival have yet to materialize.
Despite the memorandum of understanding being reached, shipping companies and forwarders are not offering bookings for containers in the south of Iran at this moment. They say the risk premium is too high.
The implementation of the MOU is expected to take time and require further arrangements. Now, a new obstacle stands in the way of trade normalization, a new wave of tit-for-tat military strikes effectively grounding any return to normal trade flows.
Despite the fragile ceasefire, Iran cannot yet benefit from commerce revival. The ships aren't coming and the attacks haven't stopped. Under these circumstances, not only will Iran continue to suffer huge losses, but the global energy sector remains in uncertainty over the Strait of Hormuz. Ehsan Keivani, CGTN, Yazd.
That is all we have for you for this edition of Global Business. You've been excellent company. I'm Lincoln Humphreys in Beijing. We'll see you next time. Goodbye for now.